An orphan plebe ends up entering the most prestigious magic academy of all the nobles, becoming the strongest infinite magician in that world. And guys, we are here for the continuation of our most incredible magician that is having. And before starting the video, I would like to thank you for everything, the strength you gave in this video. And thank you very much for everyone who signed up. This is a huge brand and you are helping me get there. Thank you very much, and don't forget, let's go to our goal of 50,000 and then 100,000. So leave a like on the video and subscribe and comment below. Don't forget to share with your friend who I'm sure will like this Manhwa. And without further ado, let's get to the video. While talking to his sister by Ryan, Chiron explains that he used the synesthesia of the spiritual zone to read Ryan's movements, defeating him more easily. Rain states that this was a good idea and deduces that Chiron achieved this because the density of his spiritual zone is very high, being praised. Spirit stays, and it's impressive that he managed to maintain that level of concentration while holding my sword. And then they go back to making fun of the boy, and when he gets serious again, Reina is willing to tell his grandfather about Chiron's career plans, which would include putting Ryan in fencing school too. I see this. He asks what will happen to his teacher, and Ryan explains that the kite teacher already finished the contract with Ryan the day before and will come to say goodbye to the boy the morning of the next day. And in the middle of conversation, one of the servants goes to them and tells them that Chiron's family is at the reception waiting for him, and Chiron jumps with joy. And on the way to his parents, one of the butlers accidentally calls him young master, and the other servant tells him to be careful because calling a noble in any way can cost him his head, but he guarantees that he won't tell anyone what happened. And when they go to the reception, he finally finds his parents after so long, but when he notices that they are very weak, Chiron deduces that they have had difficulty to sleep, thinking only if he would come back dead or alive. However, his mother reassures him, saying that they didn't go without food. And Vincent, he asks why Chiron called him there. After all, since he already finished work, he could simply return home. And Chiron explains that he received an excellent opportunity from the family, and upon hearing this, Vincent asks if any noble would have sworn a knight's oath with him or become his friend, and Chiron confirms his father's deduction, but Vincent still has doubts and believes that someone is deceiving his son with false promises. And in the middle of the conversation, the head of the Orant family appears and introduces himself as Bishop of Orant. In this, Ryan introduces himself as Chiron's sword, and Rains in turn says that he heard a lot about Chiron's parents by the boy himself. I noticed that Chiron didn't say anything to their parents. The nobles decide to take them to a banquet, and during the meeting, Vincent makes it clear that he doesn't know what a knight's oath is about, but he thinks it's unlikely that the nobles would show so much goodwill to a simple woodcutter's son. In this, he decides to clarify things and tells the nobles that he is still in disbelief with the fact that they made a deal with his son. So the bishop states that doing this is actually somewhat unpleasant, but he states who is doing this so as not to tarnish Ryan's pride, so they will support Chiron in her new journey. Getting straight to the point, Bishop explains to Vincent that his son is already capable of using the spiritual zone. This is an ability that is difficult to. He can only achieve it with hard work, because to achieve it you need to have a certain talent. And in addition, Bishop states that Chiron intends to become a mage and to get an unofficial magician's license as quickly as possible. Bishop decided to take him to the Academy Magic Alps, one of the 5 most prestigious magical schools in the kingdom. Although he is recommending it, Bischoff states that to become a mage it is not mandatory to attend school, but if Chiron does not do this he could be seen as someone who is not privileged. Therefore he recommends that the boy go to school, and the Jimoff Magic Alps is his GR for being up to the standards of the Adent family. And finally, he guarantees that if Chiron is able to graduate from the academy he will become the magician. In fact, this Vincent is thrilled to see that his son is about to realize his dream, but Bishop says that they still need to sort out his identity because the magic academies are exclusive and do not accept enrollment from anyone other than the nobles. So we say that he will have to become the adopted son of somebody. After all, this is the only way for him to get into the academy. Nobra makes it clear that this union between him will only be on paper because he does not intend to steal their son. And here this Vincente notes that it is in fact rare to have an opportunity like this, but he feels that if accepting this would be the same as giving your son to a stranger. He looks at his son and wonders what his decision will be. So Chiron opposes this idea without even thinking and states that his father will always be Vincent in that Rains try explain the situation once again and says that he will be a father and son only on paper, so his parents will continue to be his parents. So the noble enters the conversation and explains that Chiron will have the privilege of becoming the noble, something that doesn't happen for everyone. However, Chiron makes it clear that he prefers to live like a commoner than change PIS. And in addition, he is also willing to give up his enrollment in the magic school and become a magician. If you are successful you have to give up some things, and as he is not capable of doing that, the noble deduces that Chironi's dream is very trivial, and the boy in turn says that this dream could really be indifferent. And furthermore, Chiron makes it clear that he only achieved all that because his parents helped him, and for the boy to leave his parents is the same as drying up to death. After all, they are his roots. But suddenly Vincent goes against Chiron and asks the noble to accept the boy as his son, and the noble explains that needs Chiron's consent to adopt him, but Vincent reveals that the boy is not his biological son either, and then he explains that he thinks the boy belongs to a noble family, so if he becomes the adopted son of a noble he will be in his ideal place. Although Bishop note the physical difference between Chiron and his parents, to him this is still not enough to deny a son. Chiron scolds his father, and Vincent says that he needed to tell the truth to the boy at some point, but Chiron states that even though he never asked about it, he always knew about his status as an adopted son. He explains that he never asked because he wanted to feel as if they were his only parents. In this, Vincent says he was just afraid of making him give up on his dreams because of him, but Chiron guarantees that if he continues trying, the opportunities will come at some point. And besides, the boy says that he wouldn't feel good about being abandoned by his parents twice. So I won the hug and asks Chiron to forgive what he is about to do and to see this scene. Everyone will be happy. They get emotional. Then Bishop states that the Magical Academy for Alphas is accepting special entries, so Bishop says he will see with his father what he can do about it. Nobra is against this idea and says that it will be impossible to convince Alphas to agree to anything, but Bishop remembers that Alphas owes him a favor, and 3 days after this meeting Chiron stayed at the Ogent house with his family, who managed to stay thanks to the goodwill of the head of the Ogent family. And as for Vincent, he still felt guilty of trying to give his son to other parents. Chiron is worried about how long it will take his father to forget this, and after 3 days he notices Ryan crying a lot about this. The boy explains that when he gets into the carriage in front of him he will go to the fencing academy and will need say goodbye to his friend, so Chiron guarantees that she will send him letters every day, and besides that they will be able to see each other during the holidays. Ryan puts his hand on his shoulder and asks Chiron to become a magician who cost, and he in turn will become the strongest knight to be the sword that will protect Chiron. And hearing this, Rain strikes his brother and states that he must first worry about his graduation, and as for Chiron, she tells him to have some fun with his family because soon her grandfather will find a way to put him in the academy too. New Chiron thanks him for all the help they are giving him, so Reina says that the boy will indeed become a wizard, just do his best. And after that Chiron enters the carriage with her family, and in the middle of the path Ryan says that when Chiron enters he should put it on the table and tell all the other students to measure it, and Chironi in turn tells Ryan to do the same. Meanwhile the noble goes to the ensign to talk about Chiron's entry into the academy, so Usur states that he will not be able to accept his friend's request. After all, special entries are not created with an entry for nobles. After all, these entries have their own requirements, and in addition the noble states that his case is different because the boy he is suggesting is his grandson's friend, but besides that the noble states that the boy in question reminds him a lot of Alf himself when he was young. I notice that Chiron is so talented. The boy is not a noble, and at first Alf refuses to accept a commoner in his academy. Meanwhile the grandfather talks more about Chiron and says that he himself refused to become a noble, something practically unthinkable. In that Alf notes that the boy understands the nature of cause and effect, and the Nobra states that not all people understand this basic law of nature. He explains that at any moment a new opportunity may arise, but the moment one denies its origins, the person in question ends up losing everything. And furthermore, the individual never assumes that he thought he was wrong about this. Nobra states that these behaviors remind him a lot of Alfia when he was younger, and he in turn states that the danger of acting like this is that people will also have the right to judge him. And upon hearing this the noble of two that Alfia hasn't forgiven herself yet, so he reminds him that Alfia has already contributed a lot by teaching several talented people. Therefore, he should forgive himself, and he explains that his goal in teaching children is to prevent them from becoming people like him, and tells Chiron Alfaha deduces that the boy will follow the same terrible path he took. After all, they both think the same way. And then the nobleman states that Alfia was a genius born every century, and although he followed the wrong path, Alfia was able to comes back and becomes the director of that acclaimed magic academy. In hearing this, Alfia goes back to talking about the nature of cause and effect. I remember that Alfia has already seen Chiron 4 times. The noble says that this could be destiny, but you, sir, he says he doesn't believe in these fateful things, but to think more about the direction things have taken. Alfia has a flea behind her ear, and in the end she decides to accept Chironi at her gym, and 3 months after this conversation the boy goes to his parents and says goodbye to them, and asks if your hair is okay. Like that, after all it's the first once he got this cut. Chironi's mother tells him to just act naturally because short hair is popular among the nobles lately, and before the boy leaves, Vinan gives him a goodbye kiss and is proud of his son. Chiron reminds him that he will stay in a house provided by the Ogent family, therefore he gives the idea to his father to go with him, but Vincent states that a hunter's roots are the mountains and fields, and furthermore he reminds the boy that the Ogent family continues providing them, and Chiron fingers that in fact his father only refused to live in that city so as not to disturb him in any way. I follow him to the carriage. He says goodbye once again to his parents, and the boy finally arrives at the Magic Academy Alves, and the butler explains that he will pay for as many classes as the cost of the materials, so the only thing that Chiron must do is dedicate himself. So the boy thanks him and says that he never did it right. After all, thanks to his help, Chiron was able to be at that gym, but listening to all this, Butler, he cares little about the boy's goodwill and states that the commoner will never be able to surpass the noble regardless of how far he gets, and because of this prejudice against commoners the butler makes it clear that many nobles will not like him, but he states that if the boy resists, the nobles will be able to leave him alone. Chiron thanks him for his advice and says clearly that he will become a wizard. What? There are many things to learn and many people to meet, so he is taken to the main hall of the academy and decides to start walking around to get to know the place better. Then he finds some signs that inform about the 10-class system used at the academy, and he discovers which is a total of 420 students at that academy, 30 of which are in advanced classes, and finally he discovers something even more alarming in this case. Only 10 of the 420 students manage to graduate per year, and suddenly the headmaster comes to him after. If they recognize each other, they go out to walk around the academy. Then Alf informs the boy that he will need to take an admission test before entering the university. Chiron comments to him that he is already capable of entering the spiritual zone, and the SF notes that the boy is indeed very talented and regrets not having trained him sooner, so he decides to start teaching the most basic things for him and me to move on to the classes where the classes take place. Alf says that place is where the members of the beginner class stay, but they go further and go to the room where the intermediate classes are, and when they get there, Chiron comes across two aliens talking about a lot of difficult things, and suddenly one of the students ends up making a mini explosion in the place due to her sound amplification experiment not working. So the director gives her a few touches and allows her to try her experiment once again. Chiron, that place is strange because the academy is very different from anything he's ever seen. I go to the news board and he comes across a ranking of the entire intermediate class where he is also in first place. He finds the name Emi Karmis, a noble. First class. I notice that everyone there is at his level. Chironi gets excited and decides to study everything from the beginning once again so that he can climb the ranks little by little, and suddenly he hears someone calling for Amy, rank 1 in the class intermediate and looking better for her. Chironi note that she is the same girl from before who was surprised to see that a commoner knew how to use magic, and the girl who was calling Amy returns and takes the girl to another location, and Chiron he just asks so that Ami wouldn't have noticed him, otherwise he might have some problems. So her friend notices Chiron and says that the boy is really hot, and she feels like she has seen the boy somewhere before, but she can't remember which one. The other student notices Amy talking about him a lot and starts to get jealous, but Amy explains that she doesn't want anything to do with the boy because she just thought he was peculiar. But hearing this, Luna still doesn't believe it and feels that Amy must be melted by Chiron, but she continues to deny having any interest in him. After all, she's the most popular girl in the world. Intermediate class, and that's why he already had the opportunity to refuse several veterans and other Tomer companions. As for Chiron, he goes to the third testing field of the Magic Academy, where Alfia asks the boy to pay attention to the child in front because he will access the spiritual zone. In this, Alfia explains that when entering this state they will feel the letters on the floor a little differently, and the way they feel about the letters will give the size of the spiritual zone, the student's strength and flexibility. And then Alf states that Chiron only will need to answer the teacher's questions after entering the spiritual zone. The teacher asks Kemi if he can use magic, and the boy promptly answers yes, so he asks Kemi to try to access his spiritual zone, and when he does so, the boy says that the number furthest away from him is 6. Alfia explains that the diameter of Kemi's zone reaches up to 6 m, and then Kemi says that the color he sees best is red, and the teacher notes that he is the divergent type, so he does sense that his spiritual zone is so extensive for his age. And after asking all the questions, one of the nobles at the table states that the students of that year are too many, so he calls Chiron to take the test, and the teachers notice that this is the boy who is passing through special test from the director. He immediately finds this director's choice strange because the boy, besides being very old, is still using the name of the Ogent family. Therefore, they deduce that the boy's real family is not that famous, so the teacher asks if the boy is capable of using magic, and Chiron says he hasn't learned it yet. In the meantime, Alf is watching the test from afar and feels that Chiron will have a disadvantage compared to the noble children because, unlike him, these children received magical training from an early age. So, teacher asks the boy to start by entering his spiritual zone. Done this, the teacher asks what is the furthest number he is seeing, and Chiron just stays silent. The teacher deduces that the boy is embarrassed to reveal the number, so the teacher says to the boy that he just needs to answer honestly because they are not there to compare it to anyone else. Chiron says that he is able to see the number, but it is so far away that it is impossible to read, so the teacher just asks him to try read the first digits, and the boy tries a little harder and manages to see the number P on the horizon, but upon hearing this the teachers are incredulous. After all, they didn't put this number in the room, but Chiron continues saying that he is seeing these numbers and thinking a little more. The teachers notice that the size of his spiritual zone went beyond the range they set, and after this first test they ask what color he sees the strongest, and Chiron says it is the color blue, and the teachers say he is the type convergent. And when witnessing this scene, Alf understands why Conf insisted so much on putting this boy in the academy, but Alf still still thinks that Chiron is at a normal level of talent. So the teachers ask him how many spheres the boy is seeing, and he responds that there are more than 867. And listen, this Alf notes that this is something very dangerous. The teacher asks how cold Chiron is feeling, and the boy explains that his body is so cold that it appears to be ice. I hear this answer teacher have his expectations answered. The test ends right there. He informs that the class will study the development of the spiritual zone and its theory, that class 5 will study real magic. As Chiron's spiritual zone is almost complete, he recommends that the boy go to class 5 co. However, the other teacher is against this idea and explains that Chiron is a 17-year-old boy who cannot use magic. Suggests teach Chiron the basics for now, and hear that China states that not all students are as superb as Tad, and while the two listen, another teacher says that class 7 would be ideal for him because even though it's not as advanced he could skip the classes as he studies, and so the director agrees to place him in class 7. And we are told that the Magic Academy has a system with 10 classes, and depending on the evaluation, students are separated into classes of 10 different levels, but these classes can be categorized into 3 groups. Classes 10 to 8 are elementary, and these students are taught with a focus on developing a zone of spirits. Classes 7 to 4 are high-rank classes where students learn the appropriate knowledge for the use of magic and their spirit zones, and finally the graduation classes, which are classes 3 to 1 and face rigorous training to produce professional mages. And leaving for the room, Chiron attracts a lot of attention. After all, everyone is gossiping about him in this. He introduces himself to his new colleagues in a friendly way and wants everyone to get along, and after the first classes in the morning are over, the teacher dismisses the students. Chiron finds himself thinking about the afternoon class where they will have a practical class in the spiritual zone. However, he notices that the exact place where this class will take place is not written in the schedule, so Chiron calls the person in front of him and asks the training girl if they should go in the afternoon, and the girl shows shyness when she notices him talking to. However, she answers him and explains that that day's practical class will take place at the Combined Training Center number 2, and upon hearing this combined expression, Chiron is lost, and the girl explains that all intermediate classes train together twice a week, and upon noticing that the groups will train together, Chiron wonders if he has any chance in this environment. They head to the Combined Training Center. Yam already gathers a crowd in front of him due to his enormous fame at school. I heard Chironi states that he definitely shouldn't have contact with this girl, but he remembers that doing this would be impossible. After all, they will have 2 training sessions per week, but as she is the first in the intermediate classes, Chiron cannot deduce that she must be going to the graduation classes soon, but he notices that all the students talking actively and feels that this is their chance to stay out of everyone's sight. So the teacher who specializes in the spiritual zone of the intermediate classes goes to the students and introduces herself as Etela. Done that she does. Question of disrupting plants off Chiron to go unnoticed and asks the boy to introduce himself to his new classmates, so he obeys her and introduces himself to everyone, and the girl there is excited to discover the name of the boy she has a crush on, while Emmy remains curious about Chiron. After all, this is the first time she has heard his name, but his face is still familiar, and the girl next door explains that all the teachers are focused on Chiron because he had incredible parameters during the exam for new students, and thus we are contextualized that the Karmi's house is admired as a lineage product of genes whose unique ability, red eyes, is only passed down among the Karmis, and this ability gives them the ability to completely remember specific moments that have passed, and because of this, the concept of review became something useless for Karmis. And as for Amy, the youngest daughter of the family, she was evaluated as having the best talents among them all, therefore highlighting Karmis' genius and her power maximum. And after class, Amy decides to play with her subordinates, but soon gets tired of seeing everyone talking about the Karms family. After all, she doesn't consider that she had the support of her family, and her hard work and everything she achieved is the result of her solitary work, and that's why Amy believes that she has the right to do whatever she wants and whenever she wants. This is explained to us about the incident that made Amy return home even after leaving. In this case, it occurred after she met a commoner boy that day. Then she finally manages to remember Chironi and sends a loud motherfucker, so she hides it by telling her friends that Chiron's hair reminded her of a duckling, and when she returns to her thoughts she notices that the red eye really has no way be wrong because she only confused him by having deduced that he would be a noble, so she wonders how a commoner was able to enter that prestigious university. But as soon as she thinks about it, she remembers that shameful day in the alley and starts to think about loudly get drunk, and then H explains that he has already erased all traces of his past precisely so as not to leave any loose ends and to ease his burden a little. Amy decides to believe that the boy doesn't remember anything he saw that day, but she begins to glimpse the image of Chironi talking to others about her past where Amy was with several delinquents. And besides, she fears the boy will reveal his interest in men, so Amy decides decides to do something about it to prevent these misunderstandings from getting out. And what about Chiron? He feels someone staring at him with somewhat murderous thoughts. The teacher returns to the training field and asks what exactly is a spiritual zone. Then the student responds that this is the mental state of a magician, and the screen confirms the boy's answer and explains that the first training is in a sphere format as this is the easiest model to focus on. However, Etela states that there are cases in which the sphere format can also be less effective. In this she shows students the image. Area, a visible replica of the zone. Spiritual, in this she explains that that is the most basic shape of the spiritual zone, that is, the sphere shape. However, Etela states that they almost never use this basic shape, and to exemplify her explanation she uses magic to hit her target, but the diameter of her spiritual zone is only 10 meters away and the target is 20 meters away. The teacher uses fire magic to try to hit the target, but the attack disappears before reaching its final destination, and this occurs because most magic does not are capable of. Leave the spiritual zone. Then she extends his spiritual zone in the direction of the target and manages to hit it normally, although the students are all surprised to see this. In the context of a real battle, wasting time would be a huge shot in the foot, and because of this, magicians tend to use the spiritual zone in 4 different patterns, the first of which is the form of defense that follows the shape of a basic octagon, and its main function is to prevent the spiritual zone from collapsing when receiving an opponent's attack. After all, the more sides the format has, the more defensive it becomes, and the next pattern is the form of attack that transforms the spiritual zone into a star, and with this format the mage has greater ease in locating his target, and in addition this format also helps to face multiple enemies at once. And moving on to the next format, and it arrives in the form of the crosshair, a format that gives the mage a greater advantage over long distances and in the 4 directions. However, this format is not as effective against opponents at high speed as the distance between the ends and the center is very large. This makes it difficult for the magician to rotate his spiritual zone, so Etela explains that the main point of this form is with quickly the wizard manages to increase the rotation speed of the cross shape. One of the students explains that the star teacher is able to do this movement very calmly, and upon hearing this, another student despairs because he believes that the teacher can ask them to do these movements too. And as for Chiron, he pays attention in class and notices that with the method the teacher gave him, he is able to use a spiritual zone with a diameter of 10 m in real battles. And finally, this Stela presents a form of deviation, but she already makes it clear that this form is not that popular after all. Even class 5 has difficulty executing it with any mastery, so she proposes to give a practical demonstration to them. In the meantime, one of the students deduces that it is enough for her master this form to advance in class, and in addition he claims that he managed to get a perfect score in spiritual zones. Therefore, the boy believes that mastering this new phase must be very easy, as the spiritual zone leaves Etela's body, leaving all the students surprised to see this. And Chiron remembers that the spiritual zone is just the mental state of the magician, and with that in mind he notices that it is possible to separate thoughts from the body. And as for Chiron, he is curious to discover what is inside that spiritual zone of hers. In this, the teacher explains that the form of deviation is extremely complex, and because of this, many mages specialize only in this, and as the magician is not in the center of the form of this spiritual zone, it can move freely, and this allows the magician to take it to the enemy and the attack from any distance. Therefore her activity distance is effectively infinite, and when they see this, the students are perplexed and notice that rank 6 mages are in fact at a very different level from theirs. So Etela decides to do a practical test too. And the class consists of putting a student and a speed test in the form of Mira, in which she puts Amy to start the demonstration. Then the girls next door try to suck up to her again, calling her a star, but when they look at Y's face, they notice something wrong, and mentally she begs not to be the focus of attention because now she is even more embarrassed about her past with Cheroni. And then Amy does a demonstration of magical attack using Myra's form, and as expected she does very well, so all the students join her. They congratulate him on his excellent performance, and Chiron notes that even though he is a complete Lego, even he is able to say how impressive her technique is, and he states that this technique is not just a rotation of the spiritual zone done in the same place, as in addition she is also capable of hitting all targets that pass through her zone. Therefore, the magician in this form is capable of hitting everything around her in just one attack, and even though she has demonstrated a powerful technique like this, Chiron notes that Amy, she still doesn't seem to be demonstrating her full potential. After all, she moves very calmly while carrying out the attacks, so one of the students dreams of dating a senior like Emmy because that would make his school life completely different, and hearing this the girl next door advises him to stop dreaming because Amy is not interested in any boy regardless of who his family is. Chiron understands why all the boys are low for Amy. After all, she is not only a first-class noble but also doesn't have a single flaw, so Chiron wonders why such an impressive girl hangs out with those delinquents, and she goes back to her seat but before accidentally exchanges glances with Chiron and soon regrets having made her attention so explicit to him. I notice that the students wonder if the two already know each other from somewhere, but another student claims that this is impossible. After all, Chiron is a student just arriving at the academy, and with this brief look, Chiron is absolutely sure that she remembers him. Amy's counterpart also feels the same way, but in her case things are more complicated because she is afraid that the boy will tell the other students about her past because they started to see her with different eyes, so she feels that she will need to shut the boy up somehow. But soon after she recovers herself and changes her mind because Amy needs to maintain her status as a model student at all costs, and besides, Amy deduces that the students won't believe Chiron if he spreads the rumors. After all, he is just a new student. That in itself already. It takes away any credibility he might have, and to keep things confidential she decides to stop acting strangely because this could end up creating misunderstandings, and her friend comes to talk to her asking what Amy has. After all, she got red in the face like that. Who left the image area? So Amy says that there is nothing, and after that they go to the practical class separated by classes, and the teacher instructs class 7 to start training by practicing the form of defense, because having a consistent form of defense will be some importance for everyone because mages need to maintain their focus until the end and stay alive during the most chaotic battles. So Chiron begins to concentrate, and little by little he creates a structure after condensing his spiritual zone, and having done this he strengthens the foundation of the structure to prevent it from breaking easily, and Chiron feels that he was able to make the barrier, but as he is not able to see it in practice he decides not to confirm anything for now. So Chiron asks the teacher for permission to try to use the image zone, and she comments that the veterans usually use it first, but as no one is using the image zone, the teacher allows him to use it, and they see Chiron going there even after Amy's demonstration. The students say that he has a lot of courage, and Amy is perplexed. See this scene. Then his friend comments that she has been acting very strange since early on, to the point of making her scared, while at Chiron he surprises everyone with the diameter of his spiritual zone. However, he himself questions the size of his zone. After all, Chiron doesn't remember the teachers giving him this information in the entrance exam, and Chiron for the diameter of his spiritual zone to be 20 m. After all, this was already going too far, so the students start to get scared because the average student of class 7 is only 13 million. Chiron is relieved to have managed to stop his spiritual zone in time, otherwise he would attract even more attention if it continued to grow like this. He decides to go into defense, but Chiron notes that his foundations are breaking even though he had strengthened them moments before, and upon hearing the boy failing, Amy becomes less worried and states that there would be no way for the newbie to succeed right away, and tells Chiron he starts to think about what could be the making him lose focus, so he understands everything and explains that the demonstration that she did was very comfortable, so if he wants to make a change in his spiritual zone this will require more focus from him, and intentionally decreasing his spiritual zone will also cost more than his focus. Then Chiron decides to leave her at her normal size, and by doing so the diameter of her zone starts to expand even more, and finally he accesses the form of defense on her first day of school, and her friend Diameter comments to her about the new student Y, in turn, just keeps remembering the secrets that Chiron knows about her and states that there must be someone influential supporting the boy, so it's only a matter of time before Chiron recognizes the difference in his classes and makes his influence grow even more. At the academy then Amy changes her plans and decides to approach him little by little and secretly, and meanwhile the teacher is impressed by Chiron's talent as he learns, having trained his whole life in isolation, and Chiron reduces the size of C's spiritual zone, so Edel explains that by decreasing its zone its density increases. This makes it capable of resisting a considerable attack, and in addition this form also provides it with greater resistance against mental effect spells. The teacher said this, praises his good work, and says that he can now undo this spiritual zone. In this the students also congratulate him, leaving Chiron embarrassed, while the Edela she is interested in the boy's abilities and decides to keep an eye on him from now on, but besides her the students too they do the same because some admire him with his competitive spirit and others are jealous of him. But Amy continues to look at him with a tense and scared look, and the next day Chiron notices the presence of China, the scary teacher who was present during the exam. His admission, although she was responsible for class 5, she decided to teach the students in class 7, and all this with the intention of teaching Chiron and making him move up a class as soon as possible. The boy notices her staring at him, and as for the other students, they keep gossip about the teacher's love life, which leaves her deeply irritated. China decides to just continue with the class, and when demonstrating a magic, she asks the students to explain the principle of this magic. Cold, and Chiron explains that feeling cold means the absence of energy. After all, there is no cold energy, so a temperature can be increased infinitely, yet it cannot be reduced in the same proportion, because the state in which there is no energy at all is called absolute zero, and in this case they take some energy from the place they are able to create those ice crystals, and when they are broken they can create the level of temperature so low capable of killing humans, just like she just did to her students said. This she proposes to explain how the magician can absorb energy and cast magic without the help of tools, and to begin with Chiron informs that the magician controls anything within his spiritual zone, because even if this is limited to into a local zone within the existence of the magician becomes like a god, and when practicing this anesthesia it is possible to touch light, see smells, and even smell touches. These special senses of magicians are the explanation why they are able to dominate basic, natural phenomena. But even though to obtain these almost divine powers, for a magician to cast a spell it is necessary to achieve two almost divine conditions, in this case omniscience and omnipotence. So even if the magician is omnipotent, all this power will be useless if he does not have knowledge, and this explains why two mages need to study and understand the world around them even though they have extraordinary senses. When Chiron finally understands why he can't use magic, because he didn't know the concept of omniscience, because he only trained the physical part. This teacher informs the students that they will still learn about various topics, therefore the spiritual zone is only a small part of the magic. That being said, she decides to start studying basic chemistry and tells Chiron. He is shocked to realize that he is capable of becoming a wizard. I fall in the afternoon. The students are divided between studying in the library or participating in the research club, and although Chiron always runs to study in the library, he feels that he cannot reach the knowledge of the noble class. In this, Chiron attributes this tiredness mental to his sleep deprivation, but he claims to be happy anyway because now he is finally fulfilling his dream of studying magic. When trying to walk he suddenly starts to levitate. Then Chiron is taken to another place by Amy, and when analyzing the expression on the boy's face she deduces that he still remembers her, and Chiron immediately confirms that he does and tells me that she will take care of this matter right now while holding a fucking fireball. And when you notice the face, boy Amy surprise confirms that he really does remembered her, and then she remembers their first meeting, and Amy says that her first plan would be to send the boy home, but when she saw the expression on his face she started wanting to see more of that, but came across the same boy 5 years ago. Then Amy notices that he has changed a lot from that time until now, and Chiron in turn confesses that he remembers her and also remembers the moment when she asked the bandits to take off his clothes. I saw this. She was shameless and told him to stop giving that embarrassing details because all this is not. It's just a misunderstanding. So Chiron doesn't understand what she's saying and explains that he understood something wrong in this story. After all, she's not an indecent woman as he imagines it. Amy states that the criminals tried to take his clothes off because of herself without her ordering anything, and besides, she says she doesn't like men, and I see all of this. Chiron asks if she really kidnapped him just to say that, so he deduces that she's worried about the possibility of him spreading those rumors around. Chiron asks her if she would be there to apologize, because for him, a popular and hardworking girl like her would certainly have a heavy conscience for what she did. So Chiron says that the right thing to do is just to apologize to him, and I would listen if she thinks she is being persuaded by Chiron's ability with words. But then she starts to get angry and says that she has come to her senses and assumes that he used a word game to make her feel embarrassed so that he can exercise his dominance against she. That Amy calls him a commoner and asks what will she gain if she apologizes to him. After all, she won't be sure that he really won't cheat on her later, and besides, if she apologizes it means that Amy did something very horrible in the past, therefore she will be thrown into a bad position instantly, and Chiron explains that she must apologize for hurting him without getting anything in return. And hearing this only affirms to me that he doesn't know how the world works, and explains that there is no logic to put their efforts into something that won't give him any return. And besides, Amy deduces that Chiron is just complaining to appear to be right, and Chiron notices that Amy continues to pretend to be a perfect student, but inside she hasn't changed at all. So the boy remembers that the scariest thing of that academy are the veterans, because if one of them marks him as an enemy, all the veterans and ordinary students will be his enemies. Also, having said that, Amy states that if the rumor about him being a commoner gets out, it will result in expulsion. So Chiron gets scared and asks her if she's really willing to kick him out of the gym for so little. Amy explains that she's just saying that to measure how trustworthy he is. So she asks him to start by showing her his loyalty by serving her a coffee every day, and in addition the man reinforces that he is only at the academy because of a special test, therefore he must obey her if he does not want to be expelled, and the Chironi is willing to do what she wants to be able to prove his loyalty to her, and she in turn advises him to behave like this, even because his future depends on it. And to even more terror, she states that if he talks about it with any teacher she will kill him and do the same to her. Then she leaves the place, and Chiron notes that it is all a great injustice however, he believes that this is the best thing to do, otherwise he could end up being kicked out of the gym. And the next day he goes to Amy to deliver her coffee. So Amy takes the cup and turns her back on him, and the students around her deduce that he has a crush on her and has only if declared. And as for Amy, she enjoys seeing the boy going through the same humiliation that she went through, and with that she believes that he has been demoted to the opposite of someone who started to like her. So she thinks that even if he starts to shouting around that she is a perverted and delinquent woman, my love will be calm because no one will certainly believe in him. I feel trapped in that obligation. He decides to do that with mastery from now on. After all, being trapped in negative thoughts will not help her, and 10 days after this incident will again deliver her coffee to Chironi. He asks if she plans to accept the boy as a romantic father father Min immediately says no. But Shironi remembers that even though she doesn't show that she likes the boys, she always accepts Kaironi's coffee, so he does it again. His role hands her the coffee and says that this time he didn't spill a single drop, and when he sees that she is hesitant to take the coffee, Chiron starts to get impatient because he still needs to go to the library, so Amy hits the coffee throwing it against the floor and states that he should be studying instead of trying to win her over with that. And when they see this Shirelli, while the other students are indignant and feel sorry for Chiron, however the boy feels free because from now on he will no longer need to deliver her coffee every day. I fell at night. Amy regrets her explosive attitude. After all, it ended up tarnishing his image without him needing to spread any rumors against her, and when she thinks more about the boy she activates her red eye, which allows if remember exactly her emotions or a specific event or time. And for the last 10 days Amy had been saving all the images of Chiron handing her coffee. This she remembers that on the first day his reaction was very funny and amusing to her, but as the days went by, Chiron was able to maintain his static reaction as if he had already gotten used to it all. So H arrives at two deductions. The first is that Chiron is capable of controlling his emotions like a machine. The second option is that the boy was being sincere the whole time, and after finishing his studies she decides to go to the dorm. Charlie talks to Ami about the moment she spilled Chiron's coffee and says that if she wants to vent about it, she can listen to her, but Ami refuses to say anything and just goes to the dorm. And on the way Jack Artis finds her and says that he heard that a boy called Chiron was bothering her, and hearing this she deduces that he is just there to mock her, but instead of which Jack gives him a high-quality coffee and states that the renowned AM cannot receive anything less than that. She asks what exactly he is doing, and Jack makes it clear that he is trying to win her over and states that unlike Chiron, he is an ideal man for her because he was inheriting his father's position as Royal Executive Officer of Finance. Amy says that she doesn't have the intimacy to talk about these things with him, and what's more, she makes it clear that his research group is constantly shrinking, and he explains that it's a bad thing understood in this story and states that she shouldn't say such harsh words to her family. So Amy swears at every name and says that Jack is useless and depends on his family's support for everything, and besides, Amy says that running a weird research group with the intention of messing with others makes him unworthy of demanding any kind of honor. His eyes, and explains that unlike Shirin, Jack has this look like a dead fish, and I'll hear her saying he's worse than Shirin. Jack feels like he should have finished with the boy before trying to talk to her, and as for Amy, she throws his coffee away. Then she ti a four-sided formation, and for a moment he reminds her that using magic in that place is a violation of the Academy's rules for what you do. Jack gets angry at this, but he notices that Y filled the area with oxygen with the intention of setting him on fire as soon as he accesses his spiritual zone, and although he feels unable to face the best student in the class, Jack says he will take revenge for the humiliation he suffered. Having just suffered from this, he leaves the place, and Amy takes the opportunity to think about what made her act like that, because it has been a long time since she has been so agitated about something, and when I think about it, Amy deduces that she has exploded because of the fact that he threatened Chiron, or also for her being afraid of being exposed. And speaking of him, Amy regrets what she did because now he won't deliver coffee to her in the next mornings, but she feels better when she remembers that her head is calmer now. And a few days after this happened, thanks to what Y did, the Black Magician sent a letter to Chiron challenging him to a fight on the training field later in the afternoon, and in the letter he makes it clear that the boy cannot say anything to the teachers, otherwise he will regret it. Always at it, Shirelli goes to the boy and explains that Senior Amy went to the place to protect him, and so the small wave created by Amy returned to herself in the form of a tidal wave. And when walking through the school corridors, Chiron draws everyone's attention because of the incident him with Ami. In this, the boy starts to regret and wonders how he can walk with his head held high after so much humiliation. But taking into account the size of his embarrassment, Chiron believes that everyone is stopping making fun of him very quickly. I walk a little more, he knows. Sarah notes alone next to a bench that he remembers how good she is. After all, she was the one who apologized to him about the coffee, while Chiron goes to her to see if something happened, so she asks about Amy and he doesn't understand anything, and Sariel shows him the note from the Black Magician where he asks her to meet him at the training field. But when he turns around, still confused by the situation, he asks who is that guy, and 30 minutes before a student goes to Amy he tells her that the boss wants to see her, but Amy Sariel follows the way, leaving him behind. In this, boy explains that his boss told him to pass the message this way because only then would she listen to him in case he threatened her, saying that if Amy doesn't accept the invitation her man will suffer the consequences. And Sariel disdains what the guy is talking about and just follows his path with him to the library. He takes the note, and when he reads it, he suggests that Jack is behind this supposed kidnapping of Chiron. After all, he had promised to do something against the boy the day before, so Amy shouts at the student that he has nothing to do with that story, but the boy remembers that he is just a mere messenger. Therefore he has nothing to do with the sender's choices, and he reads the letter too, and I see what it is about from the Black Mage. He informs that the organization behind the subject is the Bad Circle, which in this case is the group responsible for bullying good students. She wonders wonders why they kidnapped Chiron and also doesn't understand why Emi is involved with that, while Amy, that your outburst the night before is the reason why this is happening, and the series suggests that they tell the teacher everything. After all, both Chiron and Emi are in danger now, and upon hearing this, Emi agrees that the best option in this case would be to alert the teachers. However, that situation in specific is a little more complicated, because if the teachers' council starts an investigation into this, she will need to explain her relationship with Chiron, and with that her past will be revealed and they will discover that Chiron is a commoner. So Amy feels forced to do something to stop this. She orders Sariel to notify the teachers if she doesn't return from the training camp by 7 o'clock. I hear this Sariel try to stop her friend because she doesn't know what awaits her in that place. But Amy, he just backs me off, saying that there is a reason for her to do this, but she reassures her friend and states that even with 10 men like Jack in the place she will still come out on top. And returning to Chiron, he is impressed with the fact that she went to save him, but he decides go after Amy to help her with. However, Sariel explains that Amy herself asked them to wait until 7 hours, and I heard Chiron deduces that she asked for an hour's delay precisely to avoid involving the teachers in this story, as this will inevitably expose her secrets, and his comes with the responsibility of doing something about it, and runs towards the 14th training hall where Amy is. But Sariel goes to him and uses the magic called Photonister, which allows them to get to the place even faster, and Chiron lands completely confused by what he hears because he barely had time to assimilate things in this series. He starts shouting for his friend, but she doesn't find anyone there, so he chirps. He deduces that they have changed the location on purpose. After all, he already knew that the teachers would be taken away. So I can write down the meticulous plan of this organization. Chiron starts to worry about his identity being exposed, but soon he comes to his senses and realizes that the danger there is even more serious than that, so he asks Sariel to return to the academy and alert the teachers about what happened. But she tries to insist and says that Amy had her reasons for not wanting to involve the teachers early. New Chiron reveals that the reason in question was him, and listening to this vague explanation, Sariel deduces that the rumors about him being secretly dating, in fact, they were true. To that, Chiron tells her to go quickly because the longer he delays, the more dangerous the situation could become and he could end up alone. Chiron notices a large mountainous area in the place and states that he is already used to this type of environment, so it will be easier for him to find a clue. In this, he activates his spiritual zone and soon finds 2 suspicious footprints, but these footprints end in a specific point and suggests that people have flown from there. Then he hears a strange noise in front of him, and meanwhile the student responsible for triggering the attack cynically says that his hand slipped, but he claims that those fireworks were saved for Amy's entrance. Then a few more students go to the place, including Jack himself, who says that they should be doing something better with their lives, while Jack notices that she actually came alone. Therefore he concludes that Chiron is really an important person to her, to the point of making her she obeys orders innocently, then states that she doesn't need much to capture a bunch of rats. And hears this, Jack explains that this time he came with a plan in mind, but asks him to just take her to Chiron. After all, she isn't worried with his plans. Then everyone starts laughing, and Jack states that at this time Chiron must be in the library because he barely knows what is happening there, and besides he says he is only interested in punishing her. After all, she left him very upset in the last night. Amy states that that fight will be much easier since Chiron is not there, as she will only need to kill everyone to get out of that situation. Then she attacks one of the students with her fire magic, showing that she was serious, saying she would kill them in it. Jack asks them to move quickly but maintain their positions on the target. However, Amy manages to stop them from following through with their plans, and this leaves one of the students confused. After all, she would be using the target form, so the rotation of her attacks should not be so fast. Jack notes that she is in fact fighting in a different way than she presents in the training camps, and so he deduces that she already has combat experience, which explains the fact that she is so strong. However, Jack states that she must have a weakness in his technique, and for him to have any advantage against the target form that involves horizontal rotation, he will need to attack through the vertical axis. That said, he attacks with his cutting wind magic, and before the attack arrives, Jack is already convinced, but he manages to dodge it again and explains that he used the Shima technique to defend himself. Then she turns him into a barbecue with magic, shoots him, flaming. She states that his poor performance in combat explains his poor grades at the academy. Other than that, he usually wasting your time with nonsense like this that also harms your academic performance. And listening to all this nonsense, Jack tries to resist, but Amy makes it clear that this is useless because she is willing to make things difficult for him too. But suddenly she is finally captured by the students, and with that Jack begins to celebrate his first victory against her, and then he informs her that if she doesn't disperse her spiritual zone, she will end up going crazy because what she is experiencing at that exact moment is the anti-magic. And hearing this, Emmy calls him crazy because Jack is using a strictly prohibited magic, and besides, Emmy notices that not even her red eye is capable of helping her. Faced with that situation, while Jack is celebrating again and asks if she really intends to refuse the proposal he made the previous day, but before letting her respond, he tells her to respond wisely. after all, he could even commit a crime against her. Now that she tries to bluff the students and states that if they try to do anything she will kill them, but in her mind she realizes that she is practically trapped because now not even her Chima will be able to get her out of that complicated situation, as she herself stopped training this technique at the age of 12, which leaves her completely disadvantaged in this. Emmy keeps thinking of some way to get out of that situation, and when he sees this, Jack states that she still doesn't seem to be aware of what is going on there, so he deduces that she is just tired of men coming on to her. Straight away, if he takes a knife and says he will help her with this by making a scar on her face, because then no other man will come closer to her. I bring the knife closer to the girl's face. Jack make it clear that he already wanted to do this to times. Then he asks her to beg for another chance and see herself in this situation. Amy remembers what Chiron went through that night and notices that she is going through the same situation, which is making her feel very helpless at that moment. And speaking of him, Chiron finally finds them and tell them to stop doing that while he poses angrily with a stick in his hand. And upon noticing Chiron's presence, and Jack disdains the whole situation, calling the boy Prince Charming, and as for her, she asks him why he went to the place unaccompanied. Chiron notes that his enemies are indeed very dangerous because even though they are in large numbers, they still capture one quite a feat. So Chiron remains calm and says that she will only need to buy time until Shirley details that she changes her name all the time, but apparently she is Shirley. Return with the teachers, and as he was already able to defeat even Ryan with his swordsmanship, Chiron feels that he will have no problems facing these students. He shouts for the students to release Amy immediately, but they obviously ignore the boy's request and say that they would be attacked by both if they freed her, and I notice that there will be no way to resolve things peacefully. Chiron goes on the attack against the boys. Then one of them is surprised to see the boy really going up and tells Jack he asks him to. His partners open the way and Chiron notices something strange about his body and falls to the ground at the same moment, and I see him thirsty so easily. The students claim that he was a disappointment as a prince and that's why he will never be able to become a wizard one day. Get rid of this spiritual zone as soon as possible because the students are using anti-magic against him, which in this case is a power that can make him unable to use magic forever, and in addition to causing enormous mental damage. So Chiron notices that his senses are in fact disappearing little by little and his consciousness appears to be breaking in the middle of his thoughts. Chiron remembers a phrase from his teacher where she said that to stay alive the magician needs to sustain his focus on the battlefield, and in addition the teacher teaches that the defensive form prevents the spiritual zone from collapsing against most attacks, both physical attacks and mental attacks. I remember all this. Chiron comes to the conclusion that so much anti-magic against the spiritual zone are just waves per. He decides to increase the density of his spiritual zone to the point that magic can no longer disturb it, and when he sees him trying to resist, Jack notices that the boy is just trying to act like a monster, but he claims that Chiron is just a beginner. Amy advises the boy to stop doing that. After all, there is a limit to how much he can take. However, Chiron gradually dilutes anti-magic, leaving the students worried, so Jack tells his colleagues to calm down because the emotions are affecting the anti-magic waves. Magic, and after a little effort Chiron manages to return the students' power back to them, and Amy is in doubt about what is happening as she is not able to check the situation with her spiritual zone, but as soon as she says this she notices that before magic, if that was it, she lets go and finally manages to see what was happening and is amazed when she comes across the density of Chiron's spiritual zone because she has never seen one like it. And as for Chiron, he feels something strange moving beneath his feet as if you were stepping on worms. In this, Jackie's surprised by the whole situation, claiming that it couldn't be happening. After all, his group had 6 people pressing Chiron with anti-magic. Therefore, they shouldn't have lost to someone like Chiron. This could explain his victory, and what's more, it would also allow him to enter the school through special recommendations even though he was a simple commoner. So Jack gets angry and challenges Chiron to a magical fight against him. I find myself in this situation. Chiron notes that he is at a disadvantage compared to his enemy. After all, he knows how to use magic, so partly in defense of him, landing a solid punch on Jack. Then she gives him a beating that his mother. It didn't happen when he was a child, and Chiron feels sorry for the guy and asks Amy to stop massacring Jack. But the girl takes the opportunity to get revenge on him and asks Jack to repeat what he intended to do to her, and Chiron warns that if she continues using your Shima is crazy, it will end up turning into longing. So Chiron takes her off Jack if I do this, and puts me on her lap, and Chiron of 2 that she hasn't really passed out because most likely she just fell from exhaustion after punching Jack for approximately 100 times. Then he takes the opportunity to thank her for her help and says that he found out about her having gone there precisely to save him, and he gets up at the same moment, saying that he is already better, and besides that she disdains him, saying that he shouldn't have gone, so being so weak. Having said that, she extends her hand to the boy saying that they should get out of here soon, otherwise they will both have problems with the teachers. But upon hearing this, she informs that by now Shirley must already be coming with the teachers. Well, she won't communicate about the situation. Amy is in shock and says that she had already told Shirley to wait before alerting the teachers. teachers, but Chiron states that the situation was urgent so they couldn't take too long to act, and hearing this, she starts to regret it because she will have to explain lots of things to the teachers who, by the way, don't let anything go anymore. Amy asks him if he wants his secrets to be leaked. In the meantime, Jack hears their conversation in the background and gets furious about this secret they both have and decides to just let the place quickly because they can see the consequences later. But right after she said that, the teachers finally arrive at the place, and they get me so that they are one of those old and calm teachers who let things pass. However, the teachers Sienna and Teddy. They get there and she notices that she's screwed. After all, these two are the strictest teachers at the academy, so Shirley runs to M to see if her friend is okay, and she, in turn, calms Shirley down saying that everything is okay, and suddenly Teddy throws a solar ray spell into the sky, then asks Amy about an exemplary girl. How is she involved in a chaotic situation like this, and what about the scene? He explains that Chiron went there after hearing about the two of them being in danger, so the instructor asks for. He reports what happened, but before he can say anything, Jack interrupts them saying that he can explain everything that happened, and when they hear this everyone turns their attention to him, and then Jack explains to the instructor that he asked for a duel after having a disagreement with one of the students. He alleviates the situation by saying that things like that are normal in young people their age, but the overseer says that he found out about the boy having sent a threatening letter too, and in addition the boy also used anti-magic in this supposed duel for Richa. And make use of this magicite is something strictly prohibited for academy students, so Jack claims that he only resorted to this method of combat because Amy is much stronger than him. Therefore, he would not have been able to beat her otherwise, but still, Jack pays as a victim, saying that he and his gang were the ones who suffered the most from all that, and what's more, he claims that Amy was the first one who broke the rules because she was the one who attacked the first one at the gym, and because of this brief disagreement between the two, Jack states that they were asking for a duel and to harm her even more. Jack explains that the fact that she didn't say anything to the teachers beforehand proves that she is also to blame for the whole situation, and hearing this, Amy is furious about the situation with him and says that he was the one who threatened her in the library first, and besides that he also wrote saying that he had kidnapped Chiron, and that Jack remembers that he didn't really kidnap the boy after all, that was nothing more than a bluff to lure her to the place of the duel. And why talk about the boy? Jack also notes that he did not inform the teachers before leaving, therefore it means that the boy is also hiding something with her. That said, he tells the teachers that the culprits of that bullshit are Chiron and Amy, and the boy gives an evil smile, demonstrating all his satisfaction in doing make her tremble with fear, because as soon as he discovers Amy's secret, both the local newspapers and the churches and national agencies will also know everything. After all, he himself will make a point of spreading this rumor everywhere, and when he finishes listening to all the boy's statement, Sienna tells Jack to stop talking about this nonsense. After all, their mistake in using anti-magic is much worse because in addition to using it, they also dared to use this magic to attack other colleagues, which could even be fatal. Therefore Sienna states that the boy's attitudes are serious enough to expel him from the academy, and upon hearing this, Tad reminds the teacher that the Ard family is one of the academy sponsors and therefore they should think very carefully before expelling Jack. But the scene continues steady. In your opinion, after all, the responsibility of teachers is to guide students to the correct path, so if Teddy can't do even that for her, it's better that he leaves. And I see that the house has collapsed. Jack decides to resist expulsion and claims that the money his family pays for the school will guarantee his stay in the place. After all, the world runs on money, and Sienna gets really angry with Playboy and launches a blast of ice magic at him, but she is careful not to hit the millimeter, not even his, and so the teacher proves that she has total control over her magic, and upon seeing this, Chiron notes that she in fact deserves the title of genius in ice magic, and it is to capture her magic that she asks if he is in fact sure that he will buy everything just with money, and Jack just tells her to get the ice off him quickly, and she releases him and states that the academy was already aware of his bad behavior with other students. However, they were holding back so as not to punish him. That said, she reminds him of the purpose him at the academy since the beginning was to become a magician alongside his friends, and upon hearing this, Jack remembers his moments of study and genuinely apologizes, showing that he regrets his reprehensible actions, and after that the members of the Black Magicians actually regretted their actions and went back on a path to become mages, but they went through a punishment session just so this bad behavior didn't go without a consequence. And as for M and Chiron, they are interrogated in the teacher's room, and Teddy asks what, because they went to the duel place alone without looking for any instructor. In this, Emmy enters the middle of the conversation and lies, saying that Chiron did this for her just because they two are boyfriends, and hearing this everyone screams in surprise. And guys, if you liked it off this video and want more videos like this on the channel, leave a like and subscribe. Let's go towards 100,000 subscribers, so I'll see you in the next video. And I went.